Hey everyone, today I want to be talking about vLLM, that's virtual large language models. You've probably heard the buzz about how fast it is, how awesome it is, and you're like, how do I get started? How do I try this out? And then you realize you need a server, you need GPUs, you need to figure all the different dependencies, and you're like, man, this is an absolute headache. Well, I have great news for you today because I've created a way to essentially have a vLLM server in AWS in under 10 minutes. And I've done it all with Ansible. And I'm going to provide you the step-by-step process on how easy it is for you to get up and running. That way you can have your own vLLM endpoint to play with and start using vLLM and see how awesome it is in your environments. Now, for those of you that are new to vLLM, you might be asking, what exactly is vLLM? Well, vLLM is a high-performance open source inference engine designed to run large language models. But don't think of it as just a small performance boost. Think of it like that classic scene in Back to the Future when the DeLorean hits 88 miles per hour and you see all the fire streaks go through Marty and Doc. That's what we're talking about, right? That's the type of performance jump we're talking about. And vLLM's main job is to make running LLMs, what we call inference, way faster and more efficient. Now, why does that matter? Well, every time you ask a large language model a question, it's got to crunch all these different numbers, all this amount of math that it needs to do. And that calculations cost a lot of GPU memory. And as you know, GPUs are expensive. That's why things can slow down so much. And this is where vLLM magic comes in, because it uses two brilliant techniques to work together, called paged attention for smart memory management and prefix caching for reusing computational work. Now, I know that sounds super technical, but the concept is simple. Imagine two users asking a chatbot a question. What is the capital of India? And the other user asking, what is the capital of Ireland? A normal system would do the work for what is the capital of twice, once for each user. But vLLM is smarter. When it detects that requests start with identical phrases, it processes that shared part just once and reuses that computational work for both questions. Of course, this works when the shared parts are exactly identical, same words, same formatting, and it's especially powerful for things like system prompts that are shared across many conversations. Think of these system prompts that you say, for example, you are a helpful assistant. This is the kind of thing that having the ability to share memory and computation combined with the vLLM smart batching techniques is how it frees up massive amount of GPU, memory, and processing power. So why should you care? Well, for one, you get that speed. vLLM can dramatically increase throughput, so you essentially serve more users at once with faster responses. Lower costs, because better efficiency means you can do more with less. And you don't need as much expensive hardware to handle all that same workload. And then, of course, scalability. You can handle way more simultaneous requests without your services slowing down. In short, vLLM lets you build faster, cheaper, and more scalable AI applications. And that's why today we're going to build a vLLM server with Ansible. Okay, so one more thing that you need to be aware about before we get started. It's specifically a prerequisite that enables you to use GPU instances within AWS. So if you want to get started with vLLM, you have to ask AWS for a service quota increase. Specifically, you're going to need access to running on-demand G and VT instances. This doesn't cost anything, but it requires opening up a service ticket with AWS, and it can take a few days before they approve it. So trust me, you don't want to be stuck waiting before you can get started, so go do this first. Once you have the AWS service quota squared away, AWS offers a bunch of different GPU instances like the P family and G family of instances. Each family is designed for different workloads and comes with different NVIDIA GPUs. But for getting started with vLLM, you don't need a massive expensive server. The sweet spot is the G6 2X large instance size. This instance size comes with an NVIDIA L4 GPU, which has 24 gigs of VRAM, enough to run powerful models like Llama 3 8B or Mistral 7B. It's like the perfect balance of performance and cost for just getting started. All right, so now let's go and kick this off. So in here, what we're looking at is the GitHub repository of the Ansible vLLM that has the 2 playbooks that you're going to need to run to get your vLLM server up and running the way you need it to. So if I do an ls, you can see that we have a couple files. The most critical ones are going to be the AWS helper and the vLLM installer. But before we get started, there's a couple prerequisites that you need to have in place. So one is obviously having Ansible installed. So check if you have Ansible installed. I have version 2.18.13 installed. You can use something like pip to install. So for example, if you don't have it, you could do like pip3 install Ansible, and you would get the latest Ansible version. The next thing that you need are essentially 3 different Ansible collections. So you need the amazon.aws collection, the community.general, and the community.docker. So to install those, you simply come in here and you would do an Ansible Galaxy collection, install amazon.aws. I'm explicitly picking the latest version. And then I would go for community general and then do the same thing for the community docker. So these are the prerequisites you need for Ansible. After that, you need to get the AWS CLI if you don't already have it. Essentially what you need to do for that is you need to, on a Linux machine, you would do something like this right here. You do this curl command, get this file, you'd then go in and unzip it, and then you would actually run that installer. But since I have all that, I'm not going to actually show you that particular case. I just wanted to show you the commands. And then, of course, it's all about setting up the AWS credentials files. So I'll show you a snippet of what that looks like on the screen. But essentially, you need to have your access keys set up or a session token. So you'll have something like your AWS access key ID and your access key itself. And then if you're doing temporary SSO credentials, you'll have a SSH token. And this is kind of what it looks like. Finally, once you have that all set up, you can do something like the AWS command right here. And then you can go in and you can kind of see that particular piece right there. With that set up, then the next thing you're going to want to do is go to huggingface.co, and there you're going to have to create a username and password if you don't have already a login. But if you do, once you have that set up, you're going to go to settings, then you're going to go to access tokens, and you're going to click on create a token. And then from there, just click on read for our token, and we're going to call it vLLM demo. It's going to go ahead and create a token, and then you're going to use this token for part of your installation once we get to the part that we're going to install with the playbook. So you're definitely going to want to copy this and store it somewhere for when we're ready to use it. Okay, so now that we have our Hugging Face token, we have AWS all set up, the next thing we want to do is actually run the AWS helper. Now, for the purposes of security, I'm not actually running the real AWS helper against my AWS environment, but I'm going to show you what exactly it does and exactly how it looks like when you run it. So we're going to go and kick off the Ansible Playbook AWS helper. You're going to go in and select your AWS region. You're going to then go in and select the instance type. In this case, we're using G6 2x large. We're going to be using the Ubuntu SSH user since we're going to be deploying a Ubuntu VM. And then you're going to provide essentially your SSH private key, right? So this is for you to be able to SSH into the VM that you're creating. So for example, you might have something like home, in my case, home Art Lopez, artlopezkey.pen, right? And then finally, the name of the VM that you want to have, and then the size of the VM disk. You at least need 40 gigs in order to be able to pull the vLLM image. It's rather quite large, but 40 gigs is substantial. Once you do that, then the next thing is you're going to actually get AWS you're essentially going to have this helper go into AWS and pick your different VPCs. So for example, if I wanted to install using my staging VPC, I would select 2. I would then go in and select a particular security group. Let's say I wanted the security group 2. So I see it's number 2 here, and it's security group for GPU workloads. So I would select 2. And then I would go in and select the appropriate subnet. I'm going to go pick this first one here, 0, which is the public subnet 1A. And then I would select a particular key pair. Let's say that's going to be my dev team key. So I would select 2. Once I do this, it's going to go in and essentially create this vars file for me. So if I look at the vars file, I can see that this is essentially what that helper script created for me. So now I have everything I need to actually go and do the deployment of my vLLM server. So now what we want to do is actually run the vLLM installer. So I'm going to go in and go Ansible Playbook, vLLM installer -e hf token equals. So remember that token that you created with Hugging Face? This is what you're going to use now in order to be able to actually pull the vLLM images. So I'm going to go off and run this playbook. And it's using the vars file that it has access to. So the first thing it's going to do is create an EC2 instance. And once it goes in and creates an EC2 instance, it's going to actually go in and wait for the SSH to be ready. And now it's running the install vLLM playbook. And this playbook is basically going to do all the different prerequisites that we need in order to get up and running. So that includes things like updating the cache, installing Ubuntu drivers, installing the NVIDIA drivers, installing Docker, pretty much everything that you're going to see here through this process, pulling the vLLM container. And then finally at the end, you're going to actually go and see that it's actually up and running. And of course, this process takes about 10 minutes from end to end. So I'm going to fast forward this right here so we can get to the end result. Okay, now with the deployment complete, we can see that the vLLM server is up and running. It's actually using the Qwen 3.0.6b model, so you know. And what we did on one of our tests is to showcase this is the models that are available currently, which is the Qwen 3.0.6b. And then also, if you wanted to try it out yourself, you can actually take this curl command that's right here that I put in the playbook. You can copy it and just run it on the playbook. And then you can go off and see a response for the environment. And there you have it, a way to test vLLM server with an Ansible playbook.